Welcome, everyone, to the Kingdom Authors Ignite Your Message workshop. Today is day 2, and we are going to tackle the triple threat. So I'm excited about it. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint. So you should be seeing the day 2, where we are going to cover pillars number 2, 3, and 4. Before we dive into the pillars today, I want to just quickly recap a little bit what we talked about yesterday. And that is pillar number 1, which is the holdup. We talked about different things, myths and mindset things that might be holding you back from writing your book, things that can get in the way, maybe misinformation that you've been told, or just there can be a whole lot of reasons. We talked about the 5 top myths, and then I threw in a bonus one, and we talked about ways to overcome those obstacles. And then I also touched on the imposter syndrome. And this was related to myth number 2, which was I'm not an expert, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. And I had brought up imposter syndrome. I wanted to expand a little bit more on that and didn't yesterday. And so just real quickly, in case anybody who's watching, any of you on the call or anybody who's watching the replay, maybe you've not heard of the word, that phrase, imposter syndrome. So I just want to quickly define it. And hopefully that helps you maybe to have a better understanding of what we talked about yesterday. So imposter syndrome is really simply defined is when you think other people are going to think that you're a fraud, you're a fake. You think in your mind that people are going to say, "Oh, she's not an expert. She shouldn't have wrote this book," or what was she thinking, or what was he thinking, whatever. It's when you get in your head that people are going to think this way about you. And the truth of the matter is that's not really what happens. People buy your book, typically. I mean, yeah, there's people out there who've written books that weren't all that great, but you can kind of tell by reviews unless it's a brand new book. So people will buy your book because there's a topic that they're interested in, and if they can get some nuggets out of it, then I mean they're going to be happy with that. And I don't buy a book typically thinking, "Oh, this person must be an expert in this field." Sometimes we kind of think that about people because, in a sense, you are an expert if you've gone a little bit ahead of that person. We talked about it yesterday. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD behind your name, but you have a little experience, something, some knowledge, some experience of the topic that you're writing on, that you are 1 or 2 or 3 or however many steps ahead of the person reading your book that they can gain some information out of to hopefully help them. But the imposter syndrome stops you from doing that, stops you from writing your book, or, that applies to other things in your life as well, because you have these thoughts in your head. It's like the devil sitting on your shoulder, whispering in your ear. And doesn't he do that a lot? Trying to say, "You're not good enough. You can't do this. People are going to laugh at you. People are going to think you're a fake or a fraud," or something like that. That's kind of what imposter syndrome is. And I define imposter syndrome as being very self-focused rather than other focused, meaning you're so concerned about yourself and what other people might think of you that you forget to think about other people and who might need your book, who needs your message. That need for that to meet the need of somebody else who maybe has been praying, "God, I need an answer, I need an answer," and you have that answer, but you don't share it maybe because you're so worried about what other people might think of you. That's what imposter syndrome is it's really when you get stuck in your thoughts because you are concerned about what other people might think of you. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I meant to elaborate on it a little bit more yesterday and forgot to. All right, so that's what we talked about yesterday. Who did their action tasks? Do you have any questions about anything? You should have finished filling out the questions in your worksheet yesterday. Any questions that came up throughout the last 24 hours on anything we talked about yesterday? If not, we will move on.
Well, I think that you just touched on something when you talked about the imposter, like who, that's been sort of my thing, like who really is going to be interested in what I might have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that in some ways I might fall into that category, but yet there's a lot of areas that I don't feel that. I feel confident and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are certain areas that I still fluctuate in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just takes some time really in developing that and getting over that, learning how to, when those thoughts come in, like going back to maybe self-assessment, like, why am I thinking this way? What's the root of this? And why do I care? Sometimes it's like, why do I care what people think about me? Why is that so important? I think I told you guys yesterday that I used to be super shy, and really shyness kind of falls into that imposter syndrome category because um, I was always so concerned about what people thought about me. But why? You know, why do I care? The only one I really should be caring about is what God thinks of me. And I know that He loves me and He doesn't look at me the same way people look at me. And I went through really a lot of process of learning that, and that helped me out so much. But it's a process, and as we go through life, we might tackle one thing and another one pops up, right? So that can happen with imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, well, in the writers group that I belong to, a lot of people are writing their autobiography, and I after I finished my book, I thought, well, maybe I might do something similar because I really, um, wanted to bring out my connection with spirituality. And that's where I was really having some difficulty because comments, they always comment on your writings afterwards, because
Yeah.
everybody gives you feedback. Um, I don't know about that. I don't think that that's a good, I don't believe that that could be possible and all.
Oh,
And you know what? And it's like, I just don't want to um, have fingers pointed at me because of the fact that I believe in a certain way. And
yeah.
so, in some ways, I'm falling into that category. And I don't know what I'm going to do about it yet.
Yeah. And I think today's session is going to help you too, because it all kind of comes down to um, who's your reader. And we're going to kind of talk about that today. And so, yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of people that want nothing to do with your book, but there's going to be some people who do. And another thing to think about too, besides an autobiography, is a memoir. A memoir is a snippet of your life, where an autobiography is really your whole life. And I think, and I'm just speaking from personal preference, I would rather learn more about a snippet of somebody's life than their whole life, and unless you're well known, an autobiography, I don't know how many people buy an autobiography of someone who's not famous. Because especially if it's labeled an autobiography, and I go out there and see there's this autobiography by, you know, John Doe. I don't know who he is. Never heard of the guy, Not famous, not done anything that I know of. Why would I buy it? But a memoir is, okay, he did this specific thing through this period of his life. It might be much more interesting because it's more focused.
Well, that, I mean, I had an experience that was so profound. Um, First of all, just as I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I connected with my spirituality from the time I was a small child, and I believe that we're made in the image and likeness of our Creator.
Mhm.
Years went by, and after a decade of really serious illness, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
I chose not to go the professional allopathic route.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a healing, and the cancer was gone
Awesome.
after I was on the operating table. They couldn't find it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I started to talk about this in one of my writings, right? The whole comment was, oh, you probably had a misdiagnosis.
Mm.
Forget it. And you know what? And I had two opinions, but I believe so strongly in the power of my creator and made in the image and likeness that I claimed it for myself.
Yeah.
And then I hear these kind of comments, and it's like, I don't even know if I want to belong to that group anymore,
Yeah.
because it's it's like when I saw your group and you were promoting a, a power greater than yourself, and that resonated.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, I have this idea that, oh, well, who would want to hear that anyway? That's that imposter thing again.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to take up any more of that time, but that's what an issue that I'm carrying right now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, today's topic, I think, will help you with that as well. So great. Thank you for sharing. All right. Anybody else? Any questions or comments on what we talked about yesterday? Mary says, I deal with who would want to hear it by telling God that it's on him. He's responsible for my audience. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's the devil trying to keep us from sharing our messages, so he's that way. All right. Let's move on to today's topic. So let me get back out here. And by the way, if you have not shared your takeaways yet, please do so under the yesterday's takeaways under the day one takeaway post. Each day there will be a post out like that. So you can do that. For those watching the replay, that will be out in the community. You can go out and put your takeaways under the day one takeaways. Today, you'll put it under the day two takeaways and so forth throughout the week. All right. So today we are going to talk about the pillars 2 through 3, as I said. This is something that I call the triple threat. All right, so let's start with pillar number 2. And this is your what and your why. And I combine these two together because they really are the same thing, just worded in a different way. So why, we talked about this a bit yesterday too, is why do you want to write your book? Taking it a step further is, what do you hope to come from this? And then what is motivating you? What really do you want to have come out of this? Understanding what's behind you wanting to write this book. What took off? Like, what was that initial thought to say, hey, I think I want to write a book? And then taking it a step further and saying, what do I really hope to come from this? And then what motivates you to want to do this? What's really motivating you? I'm in a group that is mostly for people who are writing low content books. And I know some of you here have written some low content books. And some of them in that group have said, I'm creating these low content books because I'm hoping to get some extra income. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, in the back of our minds, I guess you could say we all want to make a little bit of extra income. We're hoping our book takes off and we make a lot of income. But it's not necessarily the driving force behind probably most authors. A lot of authors write because they love to write. And other times we write because we're on a mission to get a message out there. We want to help people. And so it comes down to, that what do you hope to really come from it? in the end, when it's all said and done, what do you really hope to come from it? Do you want to educate? Do you want to, help people in some way? What is it? What is that thing that really drives you to want to write this book? For instance, let's say you traveled the Amazon forest, and you want to write a book about it. Why? Why do you want to write a book about it? And here's maybe some reasons why you might want to. For one, you know that most people will never get to do that. And it was such a great experience that you want to just share it. That type of book is going to be more of an entertaining type book. And you just want to share that experience with people so that they can kind of get a taste of it and live through you, so to speak. You might have some tips to share in the book. There's some people who are travel writers and they give all kinds of tips. Here's if you go here, here's what to do, here's what not to do, here's how to pack, here, things like that. And so a book like that might be um, it could be sharing what your trip and the adventures you took, but you could also be interjecting some tips and things to do and not do when you go to this particular place. So really, coming down to why do you want to write it, learning that, and when you can understand that, it helps you to plan ahead. These things, um, pillars number 2, 3, and 4 are, I call them the triple threat because I feel like they are probably 3 of the most important things that you need to have in place before you ever start writing your book. They are foundational. And to any business, not just to authors, but to any business, you need to know this. And you may have heard this stuff before, but sometimes, as I've said before, we need to revisit things. We need to be reminded of things because sometimes things get routine for us and we forget about them. And so even if you've heard this before, I hope that today it will give you maybe a new perspective or just a reminder to go back and revisit these things and sit and define out, why do you want to write this book? So maybe you have 2 or 3 books that you're working on now and you want to, which book do I start on and so forth. Pick one and use that as your example for this exercise. All right, so this one is rather quick as far as going through all of this. So any questions on choosing or deciding on really why you want to write this book and what you hope to come out of it? All right, so quick, we're going to do this exercise. It's 2 minutes. It's exercise number 1 in your workbook. Just take some time to write down your reasons why you want to write the one book that you're working on now. Get if it ever starts. There we go. All right. And this is something to ask yourself for really every book that you write. If um, if your reasons for why or what are a little bit different with different books, then I would take some time and write this out for each book that you do write. All right, 20 seconds left. Okay, time is up. Another thing that this can help you with is if you don't really even know why you're writing your book, the process of writing your book is going to become harder. It's going to stay hard. It's going to be harder to be motivated to keep on going because you don't have that why. You don't have that end goal in sight. So when you understand the reasons behind writing your book, it's going to help you stay motivated.